The U.S. moves its Israeli embassy to Jerusalem, and predictably, there is deadly violence. Why did the administration do this now and in such an aggressive way? We'll take a look at that and some other baffling things happening inside this White House. And the jury found Shelley Silver guilty, but the legal fight far from over. We'll take a look at what is next and also hear from Silver, his attorney, and some jurors. Also, after a long legal fight, the Supreme Court has finally ruled that New Jersey can legalize sports betting. We're going to show you when it starts, where you can do it, and speak with someone who was instrumental in getting it all done. Evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. I hope you had a great weekend on Mother's Day. Well, the United States officially opens its Israeli embassy in Jerusalem, and it turns into a chaotic and a deadly day.
The U.S. Embassy opening its doors at the new location in Jerusalem.
We welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel.
A joyous day for Israelis who celebrated with the U.S. delegation, including Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and others.
When President Trump makes a promise, he keeps it.
The president basking in the moment, too, by video.
For many years, we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu billing this a Trump administration victory.
President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history.
But for the Palestinians, a day rife with death and bloodshed, while 70 to 80,000 were protesting along a fence in Gaza. According to Gaza health officials, dozens of Palestinians killed and more than 1,200 wounded by Israeli forces, making it the deadliest day in Gaza since the end of the war in 2014.
We condemn in the strongest term this atrocity by the Israeli occupying forces.
Still, all smiles at the embassy where the prospect of a two-state solution was never mentioned. Instead,
those provoking violence are part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Now, by the way, we should mention right now that there is up to, as I said, 51 fatalities mentioned and hundreds injured there. Will continue to follow it. And our European allies, I should say, they're not happy about the move, and their leaders boycotted the ceremony today. You know, even if you're a casual viewer of this program, by now you know I, like the majority of you, if you looked at the polls, do not think that our president is doing a very good job. My issues, they range from the debasement of the office to policies for the few instead of the many, to the inability or the unwillingness to tell a basic truth. But tonight, I find myself more scratching my head than being up in arms. To be clear, I take issue with every administration policy and choice from the past few days, and I'm about to lay out. But more than disagreeing with them, I don't understand why they're doing them. And forget the offensiveness. It's nuts. Let's begin in Jerusalem. Okay, there's two different sides to whatever we chose to do there today, move the embassy. I get that. There is a reason, however, that every modern president from both parties talks a big game during the campaign, but never follows through on moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. But for tonight, let's ignore the violence that broke out and the fears that caused every ally of ours, as I mentioned, to stay away from today's ceremony. Now, even if Trump didn't care about the fallout or erasing the U.S. as an honest broker for Mideast peace, somebody out there explained to me why, with all the religious leaders we could choose from in the United States, he chose this guy. Now, don't take my word for it when I say the Southern Baptist pastor, he was a bad choice to represent the U.S., especially in the Middle East. Here's fellow Republican Mitt Romney. Robert Jeffress, the pastor, says that you cannot be saved if you're a Jew, and Mormonism is heresy from the pit of hell. He said the same about Islam. Such a religious bigot should not be giving the prayer that opens the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. So, why would you light an international flame and then do the equivalent of pouring kerosene by bringing a guy who insults everybody's faith in the process? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now let's bring it back to American soil. It's just as perplexing that John McCain, who all of us agree, I don't care your politics, the man is an American hero, and the man sadly is dying of cancer. We all know this. In what constitutes as good humor supposedly in Trump land, an aide of the president says he's, quote, doesn't matter, speaking of McCain, he's dying anyway. When talking about McCain's opposition to Trump's pick to run the CIA, that was the comment coming out of a packed room apparently at the White House. Shockingly, the McCains were offended by this. Take a listen to what John McCain's daughter Meghan had to say on The View.
I don't understand what kind of environment you're working in when that would be acceptable, and then you can come to work the next day and still have a job.
McCain's wife, Cindy, sent a tweet to the aide saying, quote, may I remind you, my husband has a family, 7 children, and 5 grandchildren. So this, believe it or not, is where awful turns into obscene. Now, a normal White House, I don't care the politics, would have fired this woman in the same news cycle this story came out. Team Trump, however, they promised a public apology, and, well, it's 6:06, it still hasn't happened. And who are they upset with? Not the woman who said that unbelievably callous thing. They're instead blaming the leakers as the moral offenders in the story. This is a moral and a political malpractice, and for the life of me, no one can answer the basic question of why. Well, the next 2 unanswered mysteries, they deal with basic humanity. Now listen to our Attorney General, the beleaguered Jeff Sessions. This is his modern-day delivery, I suppose, of give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
Actually, not required by law, but take that gem and add it to another Friday policy from Trump and friends. The new administration, they've decided to roll back protections for transgender prison inmates and instead will now throw them back into general population in a facility of their former sex. Does anyone in their right mind think that this will end well? Now, in both of those stories, and they both broke late Friday, the Trump administration decided to take action to try and hurt a particular portion of our population. In both cases, trust me, I look at this, no one in the general public was clamoring, let alone wanting a policy that overwhelmingly is seen as inhumane. Being cruel does not make you tough on crime. So again, I come back to a question I've asked tonight, why do it? I could also ask, why about countless things that have happened again over just this past weekend? Here's a question. Why did the same guy who campaigned on America First and promises to hold the Chinese accountable for both trade imbalances and currency manipulation do a 180 and give a Chinese tech company a pass? And it's not just any company. ZTE was rightfully penalized by Trump's own Commerce Department for working around U.S. embargoes to, wait for it, Iran and North Korea. Our government said this Chinese company was a threat to U.S. national security, and Trump said, never mind, all is forgiven. Chinese jobs come first. Someone's going to have to explain to me why this was in the national interest. And the same goes for this self-dealing. Now, by now, we all know how too many to count both cabinet and administration officials have used your and my money, that's taxpayer dollars, to either self-enrich or live high off the hog. Well, now it seems we can add making investigations go away to that list. Betsy DeVos, she's our education secretary. She's just directed her department to scale back a special team whose job it was to look into abuses at for-profit colleges. She also simultaneously has hired, wait for it, several of the people who were employed at the very colleges under investigation by her own department. Now, this is insane on its face, but it's even worse if you do just a little digging. The team of 12, they've been cut down to 3. And their new boss is the same guy who used to run the for-profit school DeVry that the group was actually investigating. Rooster Meat Hen House. Not ask why again, but this last one sadly fits into a pattern all too familiar since November of 16. Now, All these things I mentioned, they've happened in just the last few days, and sadly, it's become the norm, not the exception. And it speaks to a group of folks who are doing one of two things. They're either acting blindly without rhyme or reason, or I'm starting to worry it's the latter. They're doing what they believe: divide, hurt, and self-deal. Either way, it still doesn't make sense to me. All right, when we come back, prosecutors, they got a conviction on Shelley Silver, as reported on Friday, and that followed a win for the government in the Joe Percoco trial. Are we looking at the new normal in a wake of a Supreme Court decision that basically has redefined corruption?